12,000 years. That's how long a carved human body has been hiding inside the wall of the world's oldest temple in southeastern Turkey. Not carved on the wall, sealed inside it. Lying on its side, head and torso intact, the feet snapped clean off. Archaeologists just announced it during the unveiling of Structure C at Göbekli Tepe. Before I show you the single decision that put a person of stone inside that masonry, you need to know what kind of place this temple really is. The announcement came from Turkey's Culture and Tourism Minister Mehmet Nuri Ersoy during the unveiling of restored Structure C. He held up something archaeologists have hunted for decades, proof that the people who built this site didn't just carve animals into giant pillars, they carved themselves. And then they hid one of those carvings inside the building. It wasn't damaged by collapse. It wasn't dropped during construction. It was placed, deliberately, horizontally, pressed into the chamber wall between structures B and D, as if to make absolutely sure nobody saw it again. Picture the moment of discovery. 12,000 years of dust, fingertips brushing across what looks like ordinary stone, then a face, eyes, a torso, a human body fused into the masonry. Researchers describe it as a votive offering, a sacred object planted into the architecture itself, like sealing a prayer behind drywall. But here's the unsettling part. The statue has no feet. Either they broke off long ago, or someone snapped them off before burying it. Either way, this figure was never meant to stand again. Whatever it was, its journey ended in that wall. So why? Why would a society that hauled 50-ton limestone pillars across miles of plateau, that carved foxes and scorpions with breathtaking detail, take a finished human statue and entomb it? They had no writing to explain themselves, no tablets, no texts, just stone, silence, and the choice to bury one of their own creations alive inside the temple. To even begin answering, you have to understand how absurd this site is in the timeline of human history. Because Göbekli Tepe is not just old. It is so old it breaks the rules of what we thought was possible. Göbekli Tepe sits on a windswept ridge in southeastern Turkey, near the city of Şanlıurfa. Construction began around 9,600 years before Christ. Read that again, 9,600 BC. That is roughly 11,500 years ago, the very edge of the last ice age. There were no cities yet, no pottery, no writing, no metal tools. The people who built this place chipped multi-ton T-shaped pillars out of bedrock using flint. Then they carried them, raised them, and arranged them into rings, all without a single domesticated pack animal to help. To grasp the scale of that gap, compare it to monuments you already know. Stonehenge? Göbekli Tepe predates it by about 6,000 years. The Great Pyramid of Giza predates that by roughly 7,000. The invention of the wheel, the first cuneiform tablets, the founding of Babylon, all of it comes after. When this temple was being raised, woolly mammoths had only recently gone extinct in most of Eurasia. Humans were still hunter-gatherers. They had not yet domesticated wheat. And yet, somehow, they organized themselves to build the most sophisticated stone monument on Earth. The site is dominated by T-shaped limestone pillars, some over 5 meters tall and weighing more than 10 tons. They stand in rings, like silent committees of stone. Their surfaces are carved with foxes, lions, snakes, scorpions, vultures, wild boars, the dangerous edges of the natural world. A few pillars even show stylized arms and hands wrapped around their sides, suggesting the pillars themselves represent giant abstract people. But until now, the human form was never the centerpiece. The animals dominated. Humans hid in the corners. And then archaeologists found one human sealed in a wall. Here's where it gets really interesting. Göbekli Tepe wasn't built once and left alone. It was used, modified, and then, in a stunning act of communal effort, deliberately buried. Entire enclosures were backfilled with dirt and rubble in antiquity, as if the builders were tucking the temple into bed. We see the same pattern at the nearby site of Karahan Tepe, also deliberately covered around 8000 BC. Whole sacred spaces, packed with monumental art, sealed under earth on purpose. For some reason, these people believed certain things were meant to be hidden, not displayed. Why bury your own temple? Theories range from purification rituals to changes in belief, to fear that the spirits inside had become too powerful to face. Whatever the reason, the burial preserved everything. That deliberate act of sealing is exactly why we can now stand inside enclosures that look almost untouched by time, and that pattern sealing the sacred is the key to understanding our human statue. Because if the entire temple was eventually buried, what would it take to single out one object and seal it years, possibly generations, before the rest? Now, zoom in on the figure itself. The statue retains its head and torso. Researchers have not released exact measurements, but it is large enough to be considered a major sculptural find. Its face was carved with intent. Its body was shaped deliberately. It is not a rough lump, it is a person. And just up the road at Karahan Tepe, archaeologists in 2023 unearthed something even more extreme, a 2.3-meter-tall stone man anchored to bedrock inside a niche, ribs etched along his chest, hands resting on his knees, staring out from inside the rock. That Karahan Tepe figure is sometimes called the world's oldest realistic statue of a human being, dated to around 9400 BC. Bald, anatomically explicit, half fused to the stone floor. Some researchers believe it represents an ancestor, a deceased leader, perhaps even a person witnessed at the moment of death. Now hold that image in your mind, because it changes how you read what was just found at Göbekli Tepe. We are no longer looking at random art. We are looking at a region-wide tradition of pinning a human figure into sacred architecture and walking away. And it gets stranger. The Göbekli Tepe statue is missing its feet. At Karahan Tepe, the standing figure is fused to the ground, feet implied, but trapped in stone. In other Neolithic finds across the region, statues are deliberately decapitated, defaced, or chipped before being buried. There is a recurring signal here. These were not casual repairs or accidents. The figures were neutralized, disabled, made unable to walk away, as if their power had to be contained, restrained, locked in place. Imagine carving a god, then breaking its feet so it can never leave. The Göbekli Tepe statue sat horizontally inside the wall, parallel to the ground. That orientation matters. Standing figures usually project power outward. Reclining figures, especially placed inside walls, evoke burial, sleep, dormancy. Some archaeologists compare this to the practice, found across many later cultures, of placing relics inside foundations to protect a building. A bone in the threshold, a coin in a corner, a statue in a wall. The world's oldest temple may be doing the same thing, but with a stone human at its core. Whatever the figure represented, it mattered enough to seal away. The detail in the carving suggests this was no minor figurine. This was an investment of time, skill, and meaning by people who had few luxuries. Every chisel mark mattered. Every proportion was chosen. And then the entire object was hidden. Think about how strange that is in any era. You create something beautiful, then you make it invisible. You spend a lifetime of expertise on a face, then you wall it up. That paradox is what makes this find so important. The leading theory is that the statue was a votive offering, a gift to the temple itself, or to whatever the temple was made to honor. Picture the rite: torches burning low, masons in a half circle, dust on their hands, the figure laid flat, hands pressing the first stones around it. In later cultures, we see this constantly. Buddhist statues with relics in their hollow chests, Christian churches with bones beneath the altar. If Göbekli Tepe followed that logic, then the human figure wasn't being thrown away, it was being fed to the architecture. A second theory is that it was a guardian. Across the ancient Near East, figures were placed at thresholds, doorways, gates, foundations to ward off harm. Sealing one inside the wall between two major enclosures would make it a literal guardian, watching over the seam where one sacred space met another. Researchers floated this idea after the find was announced that the figure may have served as a sacred protector. But guardians normally face outward. They have weapons, eyes, ferocity. This statue is featureless enough that it might not be a warrior. It might be something quieter. Here's where it gets darker. A third possibility, and one researchers have not ruled out, is that the figure represents a person who was sacrificed symbolically or actually to consecrate the space. Many archaic religions believed that the death of a body or the symbolic killing of an image could power up a place forever. Snapping the feet, sealing the figure into the wall, hiding it from human eyes, these are not the actions you take with a casual decoration. They are the actions you take when you believe a presence is still inside the stone. Site by site, across this corner of Turkey, the same pattern emerges. Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Sayburts, all of them filled with carved animals and pillars, and almost all of them eventually sealed. A region of temples that built things specifically to bury them. Now imagine the labor. Tons of fill dragged uphill, by hand, to entomb monuments that took generations to build. Whatever these people believed, it was worth that effort. The act of sealing was not afterthought. It was the climax. The ceremony itself. The Göbekli Tepe statue might be a smaller, earlier version of that same climax. A miniature, personal version of the temple-wide burial that came later, as if the builders practiced the act on a single carved person before working up the courage to do it to the entire temple. That would mean what we just found is not only the oldest human sculpture entombed in a sacred wall. It might be the first surviving evidence of a uniquely human idea that we honor what we hide. That sacredness is born the moment something disappears from view. What does this change today? It rewrites the story we tell about ourselves. The standard narrative says religion, ritual, and monumental art emerged after agriculture, after cities, after surplus. Göbekli Tepe already broke that. This statue cracks it open further. It shows that 12,000 years ago, hunter-gatherers were not only carving stone people, they were performing complex symbolic acts on those statues, sealing, hiding, neutralizing at a level of sophistication we use to credit only to much later civilizations. Belief, it turns out, may be older than the plow. Now you can see what that decision was, the one I promised you 12,000 years ago. Someone, possibly a council, possibly a single shaman, decided this human figure no longer belonged in front of the community. It belonged inside the wall. Feet removed, body laid horizontal, stone closed around it. We may never know the name of the person who gave that order, or the name of the figure they sealed. But after 11,500 years, that decision finally surfaced. So, who do you think the statue was? Guardian, gift, or something we still don't have a word for? Tell me in the comments. Thanks for sticking through to the end. Your support means the world. Like, share, subscribe, 3 quick taps.